When I was 3.5 years old, my father Epps Gates and my mother Patience, carrying my baby sister Martha in her arms, forded the James River on horseback as we made our way to a new home in Paint Lick, Kentucky. The year was 1809, and some of my mother's Robertson family had already settled there. Some had followed Daniel Boone some 25 years earlier. We had a good life on the farm in Paint Lick, Kentucky. We often saw our grandpa James Robertson and our grandpa Edward Gates, and we all helped each other out. I was not quite 10 years old when my father died, and I became the man of the house, with the help of my uncles, of course. Our baby brother James was born the year our father died, and our mother did her best to care for us all. All in all, we thrived. Both of our grandfathers knew a family named Fitzpatrick. Clayton and William Fitzpatrick were a little older than I was, but they were friends. I once purchased an old rifle, shot pouch and horn from Clayton. Then on December 29, 1831, I married his little sister Rebecca. It wasn't long before she gave me a son we named William. It should have been a happy time. But Rebecca left this mortal realm while William was still an infant. My mother, Patience, was of great help to me. Little William was just 2 years old when I married Mary Wiley. Mary and I would have 5 more children, the oldest being Carey Allen, the youngest Mary, and the others George, James and Margaret. There were 3 old families living in Paint Lick when we first arrived. The Wiley family had come from Ireland, and it was said that their great-great-great-grandmother had died en route and was buried at sea. The Perrin family had come from Canada, though there were relatives in Virginia. David McWilliams had 3 daughters. Sarah McWilliams would marry John Wiley, and her sister Hannah would marry Robert Perrin. My beloved Mary, daughter of John Wiley and Sarah McWilliams, would pass away on May 9, 1849 at the age of 39. Never one to let a good thing go by, I would in 1852 wed Mary's first cousin Mahala Perrin, daughter of Robert Perrin and Hannah McWilliams, and a first cousin to Mary. Mahala was 36 years old, and we had 2 more children. Mary Jane and Thomas Jefferson. Our little Tommy, who followed his big brother Carey Allen, age 19 at his birth, everywhere. Mahala and me could have just lived out our lives in Kentucky, but there was land to be had in Texas. So in September of 1858, when little Tommy was just a year old, we left the farm and joined a wagon train headed for Texas. The trip took 51 days, but we were in good company. Some of Mahala's family came to Texas with us. Carey Allen was very attentive to his baby brother along the way, and we always stopped to observe the Sabbath on Sunday if there was grass and water for the livestock and wood for a fire. There was a celebration when on November 29th, we arrived at our new home in Cullen County, Texas. We had 500 acres just 4 miles outside of what is now the town of McKinney. Our neighbor, James Throckmorton, would after the Civil War be elected governor of the state of Texas. We had brought very little with us from Kentucky. Just enough cookware to prepare a meal, barely enough clothes, and only 1 piece of furniture. It was an old rawhide trunk with a false bottom and handmade handles, latches, and tacks. It had been in the family as long as I could remember. I also brought the old rifle, pouch, and powder horn I had bought from Clayton Fitzpatrick. That rifle was the first gun that Carey Allen ever fired. He killed a squirrel with it. As Tommy got a little older, Carey Allen would take him rabbit hunting with that rifle. Carey would do the shooting. And little Tommy? Well, he got to carry the dead rabbits. They were mule deer rabbits with long ears, and sometimes Tommy would get tired and just throw those rabbits on the ground, exclaiming,
"I'm not gonna carry these doggone old deers any longer."
It may have been more than just the lure of new land that drew George and Mahala to Texas. His baby sister, Martha, with her family, had left Kentucky for Missouri just 3 years earlier. For a very long time, something had been brewing. In the air, in the fields, where the slaves toiled, and at the dinner table, you could just feel it coming. The trouble was, Kentucky just couldn't seem to make up its mind which way to turn on the matter. While George and his family, along with his baby brother James and his little sister Martha, would end up on the side of the Confederacy, their older sister Rebecca and her husband William Phelps, would choose the side of the Union.
Martha Patience was the fourth child and the second daughter of Patience Robertson Gates and Epps Gates. She was born in Virginia and was 6 months old the day her parents emigrated to Kentucky. The journey by horseback from Richmond, Virginia to Girard County, Kentucky took 3 weeks. An early incident in the childhood of Martha was when she cared for her grandfather Robertson, while all the slaves were in the fields. He died of cancer of the tongue.
She would have been around 13 years old when he died in Kentucky.
Martha had decided to live with her widowed mother until she met William Harvey. They married October 15, 1829, in Madison County, Kentucky. They lived in William's home, where all of their children were born. During their early married life, Martha was not in good health, but she managed to rear 13 of her 14 children. In 1855, the William Harvey family moved to Lynn County, Missouri, and settled in the northern part of the state, near what is now Meadville. On their journey, one of their children lost his shoes, so the family stopped, gathered materials, and while the horses rested, the father made a pair of shoes. The mother was always very strict with whom her children associated. On the trip west, some other travelers fell into their caravan. After sizing up the situation, Martha Patience decided these were not the right kind of folk, so the Harveys got up real early the next day and pulled out ahead of the rest. When they arrived in Missouri, they camped in the yard of some relatives, but the mother was afraid they would wear out their welcome before they could get a place of their own. William carried a New York bank draft to pay for his farm. He rode horseback 50 miles to settle the deal on the near farm, only to have the owner refuse the draft. William rode back and returned with the cash in hand.
The farm home in Missouri was described by the youngest daughter, Betty Harvey Oliver, to her niece Eunice Fowler as follows.
Martha planned a flower and vegetable garden with a long row of sugar pear trees along the fence. Down the center of the yard was a wide brick walk with large flower beds on either side. Within the closure were herbs, shrubs and vegetables. William had a grove of black walnut trees and a large apple orchard. Martha was a great lover of nature.
Betty Harvey Oliver related this account about her childhood.
When I was a girl on my father's farm, we used to stay at home most of the time, and did very little running around. Most of the young people were kept at work, so time didn't hang heavily on their hands. At night, if we didn't have anything to do, especially during the long winter evenings, my father used to stand us up, and we would have a spelling bee. There were 11 children at home, and there was no need for anyone to get lonesome. 2 of the 13 children had married. Nearly everything we used in those days was made out on the farm. My father made all of our brooms and shoes. All our clothing was made by hand, there being no sewing machine then. Most of the cloth of which clothing was made was of home manufacture. I was grown before there was a sewing machine in the house. When we went any distance from home, we rode horseback or in a wagon. About 1/4 of a mile from the Harvey home was the young couple by the name of Pershing. Mr. Pershing was a foreman in the building of a railroad across the state. Martha Patience Gates Harvey, my mother, attended Mrs. Pershing at the birth of her son John H. This was in the year 1860. I went with my mother to see the baby the Sunday after he was born. After the Pershings moved to Laclede, 7 miles away, Mrs. Pershing would often come to visit us. She would come to visit us on the workman's hand car, spend a day, and return the same way in the evening. In January 1920, General John J. Pershing was honored in Dallas, Texas. His childhood playmates, George and Betty Harvey Oliver, got to see him while he was there. Go to Gates Rowan has accounts and pictures of this event.
James Robertson Gates. James was the 5th child and 3rd son of Patience Robertson Gates and Epps Gates. He was born after his father's death near Paint Lick, Kentucky, but in Madison County. Epps was drafted into the War of 1812, died before he was called into service. Cousin Goda Gates Rowan recalled hearing her father, Carey Allen Gates, speak of his Uncle Jim. James Gates grew up on the family farm and married Permelia Agnes Patterson. Of their 9 children, only 3 daughters had families: Martha Jane Gates Henderson, Lou Gates Moore, and Permelia Gates Todd. Cousin Maggie Henderson Gates of Paint Lick, Kentucky has been most helpful in giving data of her family and of her aunt. James Gates looked after his mother, Patience Robertson Gates, until her death in 1857 at the age of 92 years. James was on the Confederate side during the Civil War period. He did not fight. But since Kentucky was a borderline state, he had a hard time of it. James died in 1879 and is buried in Kentucky.